and welcome to the first interview of the Foreverness Project podcast. We are very excited today because we have with us Mr. Wessel Reijers, who holds a PhD in ethics of digital content technologies um, by the Center Adapt in Dublin, who is an important institution regarding AI research, data analysis, and other technologies. Um, of course, we believe that his expertise and his views, given the nature of our project, is going to be very relevant and very interesting for anyone who follows us and for anyone who is genuinely interested in how technology is shaping and will continue to shape even more intensively so our life, the way we live, particularly from an ethics standpoint. Wessel defines himself as a passionate in the intersection between philosophy and technology that shapes the human world life. Thank you very much for joining us today, Wessel. And we would like to start with a question. We are in an historical moment, particularly technology-wise. So, with everything that's going on, all the technology advances that we are witnessing right now, how would you describe this moment, and how do you feel about it?
Thank you, Pablo. That's a very big question. I think so. I mean, it is kind of interesting how technology and politics in these days are related. So I think that's maybe the defining feature of our time, where figures like Donald Trump, who in their inauguration have the big tech billionaires sitting in the second row of the audience, and for no other reason because then that these are the two major figures of our world because they are building those new technologies, and and part of that is of course also artificial intelligence, which is now speaking very much to the imagination, and so creating a lot of fear where people, even people like Elon Musk and Hawkins and others, write letters to say that artificial intelligence is an existential threat to humanity, um, while they are building these systems. And I think so. If I have to characterize the current moment in that sense, I think we are in a very confused place, because I think people know very well that, I mean, a lot of people know very well that these systems are impressive in their capabilities, but at the same time that they kind of are some kind of a sophistic kind of trick, that they that that it's a word prediction machine that mimics uh, our cultural expressions very well. So we are kind of skeptical about, like, I think, or one side, we are, on one hand we are skeptical about capabilities, also skeptical about these statements about existential risk and about these machines, for example, becoming conscious. But at the same time, we have this kind of eerie feeling once we use these things, because we don't fully understand them, and there is something going on um, that cannot just be reduced to simply an analytic category like word prediction. So I think that's kind of a very broad sense where we
So,
find ourselves.
so confusing moment
I
would
confused.
be
Yes.
confusing moment, and how do you feel? You said you feel a skeptic, or not necessarily, or
I think
I'm not.
everybody feel. I think skepticism is widely spread actually.
Uh,
So of course there's a veneer of confidence. Like if you go on the internet, on social media, for example, there's a veneer of confidence almost everywhere where everybody is like, "Oh, AI is the new revolution," and you have to jump on the bandwagon. And but under that veneer, I think there's a deep uncertainty. So an uncertainty in the sense that nobody really knows the value of these things. Nobody really knows kind of the uncertain effect, like the nobody can really grasp the uncertainty that comes with these machines, So in that sense, I think that it's a widespread uh, sense that people have.
I
Absolutely.
suppose, Vessel, when we talk about skepticism, we have two sides of the coin, right? Somehow, there is no possible skepticism about the tool that is put in front of us, right? So the power of AI as a tool, I don't think, that is, of course, you have with the caveats of knowing what is it that you're getting out of AI, the power of analysis and synthesis of data information, that is unquestionable. Would we agree on that part?
The skepticism towards these claims that I mentioned, like
Yeah,
claims
so the skepticism goes towards
this
the
can
future
consciousness.
capabilities of them. And this is precisely maybe the point where we would be more interested in. Because for me, whether machines become conscious or not is something for time to answer. I don't think it has a theoretical answer because, given the complexity of the machines, I personally don't believe that we could assert one way or the other that they will become conscious, that they will become autonomous. Time will tell. For me, the interesting question to initiate this would be, when do we consider that a machine has become conscious? And that will be, like, from a philosophical point of view, the hard consciousness problem, after all, applied to machines. Have you got any views on that?
Well, I think those two views contradict each other in the sense that if we say time will tell, it implies a sense of, it implies a sense of radical empiricism. It basically says like, I mean, if we say time, if we take this really, really seriously, if we say like time will tell, then the only thing that we can do is wait for the event to happen to observe it. But there is no credit, like with any radical empiricism. If you've never seen a black swan, you cannot anticipate a black swan. There's no way to do that. So,
Exactly. That's what
so
I am proposing.
so in that sense, the second part kind of contradicts this a little bit, because if we say like, okay, but then we have to now figure out when, you know we would actually say that a machine is conscious, and then of course theory comes all the way back in, because then we need some sense of anticipation. So we do need to talk about.
Exactly. So that was is I was say, do we, okay, we're going to wait for the event, but we have to define the event before we observe it.
Mhm.
If we don't define the event and we just go in denial, machines are not consciousness, like there used to be women have no soul, like, so if you make those assertions, you can never see the event coming. Now, what I like to have for myself is like a concept which I don't yet have, of when would I consider a machine's conscious. So from a theoretical point of view, and that's how you say, is like, what's do we have any ideas on that?
Well, I don't have an answer, but of course I have. There's ways to think about it. I mean, I think the main issue with this question is that we already know that machines can appear conscious. Like there are people already who have been, or I mean, that was already back in the days with ELISA, that was developed at MIT by Weizenbaum. It's already been for a while now that quite simple machines have triggered the assessment of people to think that they're conscious. And of course, you can then go
What
to
do
the
you, what do you mean? Sorry, can you explain that, because I'm not sure I got that part. It's like they pass some kind of test, like Turing test or
Oh,
something
so
like
no, no,
this.
but this was not a Turing test. So, ELISA was basically a very simple model built in the 60s or 50s. I don't know exactly when anymore, by Weizenbaum. And the model was, the only thing it was doing is kind of mimicking a conversation by a psychotherapist, because it would like ask questions back, like, so you would say something and it would like return the question. And that's very simple dynamic made people think that they were actually talking with a conscious
Okay.
psychotherapist.
Okay.
So and of course this is like a very early model, and current chatbots are much more sophisticated. But also today that there are, every so many months, or there is another engineer that writes on the internet, wow, I have this new model, it's conscious, like it happens regularly. Like last year there was this Google engineer, no, where that happened. So um this question sits at the background. I think so. So we already, like, so this moment, some people already think this moment is there. So it's not so um I think so one question there is like, how do we deal with the possibility of deception? Like, so with other people, it never comes up because we already live in a life, or like our life world is saturated with other minds, and we never question that other people are conscious. We should maybe, or we could, but we don't. But in this case, this question comes up directly because people are being, are mistaken in their beliefs that something is conscious, because we know that already from these different stories. So how not to be
Do you
mistaken?
think?
In which way are
Well, for example,
I
with
was
the ELISA case, like, so um, there's a conversational agent that appears conscious to you, whereas then if you reveal what the agent really is, like a simple program, just
okay.
mimicking a conversation, then everybody sees, okay, oh, yeah, actually it's not conscious, of course.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
in a way,
so. Do you think we could approach this problem from a completely different angle and not worry about our consciousness? We don't even know what that means for ourselves, to be honest. We cannot put words into what consciousness is for ourselves. Um, could we be wondering about machine autonomy as a more important parameter of their influence of our future? As than whether they're conscious, because whether they're conscious or not, but if they are autonomous, is that not then when we have to start integrating them into our landscape?
well, yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think the question of autonomy, I have a particular view on anyway. For example, I think a text is autonomous in a sense, like, even though a text is completely dead and, certainly not conscious, like a book, text is
Text.
a book. Yeah, text,
Ah,
like
text. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
you have a book and there's a text
yeah,
in the
yeah,
book.
yeah, yeah.
I think a text is autonomous, which basically means that there's a gap between the intention of the author and the interpretation of the reader. So there's, in that sense, the text itself is autonomous because there is no one-to-one correspondence between the intention of the author and the interpretation of the reader. And with machines and with many technologies, actually, you could say that this is actually the case. Like with technologies, apart from AI, are many of them are in a sense autonomous. So you have a designer. Designer intends certain things when building a technology, and after that, after the fact, also there's this gap between the intention of the designer and the actual use of the person who is going to use that, or who is going to relate to that artifact or that system. So in that sense, I think actually, even before AI, for a long time, technologies have been autonomous, uh, in a certain sense, just like a text.
That's deep, but I like it. That's quite deep. Yeah. Yeah.
But
Absolutely.
when I say autonomous, I I think I'm referring more to the automata,
Hmm.
so that they are self-propelled. So a book is autonomous, but it's passive object.
Hmm.
Whereas a robot that goes around your house, plugs itself into the power system to recharge, and goes to the mechanic if it needs to do so, and has behavior around you,
Hmm.
it's different from a book.
Of course, yeah. I mean, because here you get to the kind of cybernetic question, like, so you have simple homeostatic devices which have negative feedback mechanisms. Even they have some sort of agency, like, for example, on the steam engine you had, what's it called again, like the control device that makes it kind of interact with its environment kind of autonomously, in a sense, so even there, even with negative feedback, you have a certain form of autonomy, and those devices we have had for a long, long, long time. I mean, I think the first, what's it like? I think in cybernetics they kind of go back to the first like water clocks that they used in rivers and stuff, like where you already had like yeah, kind of autonomous devices which are not computers. So in that sense, even before the computer, we had autonomous devices. Also in this sense, basically, in this kind of sense of like having a cybernetic feedback mechanism. But of course, the interesting thing about computers is that they have this kind of like not negative but positive feedback. That they are not merely reactive with regards to fluctuations in the environment, but that they can also respond to contingencies and integrate them into their own behavior. So that is new, of course, and that happened with the advent of the computer, and that's kind of what AI is now making even more sophisticated, in a sense. I don't think there's a huge break. I just think that this process is becoming increasingly sophisticated, like with, for example, self-driving cars, or which will increasingly be autonomous in that sense, indeed, and being self-propelled in a sense.
Like a follow-up question for that would be like, is that velocity that they are that technology is has right now in becoming like maybe more, I don't know, more influential to our life, to our day-to-day life, and it has definitely more power to influence us in many things and to help us in many things. Um, is there going to be a moment in which it's gonna start to be like completely independent from us, more than it is right now, in a way that we cannot have control over it, which I think would be like the tipping point for us to where or what most of us may have at some point think about it, like, okay, what would be scary if it's at some point AI or different technologies would escape from our control. I think it's a very basic question that we all talked about, but yeah, that would be interesting to have your views on that.
I guess it depends on who you ask. Like, there are certain philosophers that think that we already passed this point like a long time ago, in a sense. I mean, if you think
Mhm.
about like the maybe the most notorious and most famous philosopher of technology, Martin Heidegger, um, his basic comment is that with the advent of modern technology and kind of the completion of the cybernetic worldview in his view, we already got to this point, and then we should not see it so much. So for him, it's not so much that there is an object like that is autonomous, like there's not a
Mhm.
thing itself that is autonomous, like a robot, or that
Yeah,
that was not the point. The point for him is that technology actually, so he says in this famous essay, technology is nothing technological. It's not like we should not directly think about things,
yeah, of
but
course.
devices and systems,
Hmm.
but we should think of it as as he calls it, like a way of revealing. Maybe it's a better way to put it is, because he's kind of inspired by Aristotle, is that for the ancient Greeks, for example, techne didn't denote things; it denoted a virtue, or so a way of revealing. So the techne was just a way that we respond to the world, basically. A way in which we circumspect, in which we deal with things in a circumspective way, basically. So that's and And what Heidegger is arguing in his essay is that this way of revealing, of course, is very old. Like techne is very old. It's like just the Greeks, they just name something that we know from the dawn of humanity, basically. But what he said so his point with modern technology is that when there is techne, so when we have this kind of particular way of revealing that when we are, for example, just building something, like just hammering something into the wall, then there is a certain link between that activity and um, a purpose for the sake of which it is being performed. So so there's this particular structure where you use a hammer in order to hammer a nail into the wall, in order to fix the roof, in order to give yourself shelter. So there's like always a kind of recursive return back to the telos, so the aim, so to say, of that activity with regards to our own being, so to say. And this is why for Heidegger, like, so these techne, as understood by the Greeks, is kind of it gives us access to our own being, so to say. Um, and this connection, that is exactly what he criticizes in this essay about modern technology. He says this connection is cut loose by modern technology, and not just because he didn't really talk about computers. He talked about the hydroelectric dam, for example, in the
Hmm.
Rhine. So is one of his examples, where he says that modern technology um, indefinitely kind of extends this recursive returning to the end for ourselves, basically. So it becomes it and when we say modern technology here, we don't he doesn't mean this collection of things. He means that we ourselves have a different, it's like a perversion of our disposition. So it's a perversion of the way that we interact with the world. So through that engagement with, I mean, still of course engagement with things, we start to consider the entire world as what he calls a standing reserve. So everything becomes a everything becomes a resource to be used up, including human beings themselves. Um, so in that sense, for him, modern technology then already became this like uncontrollable force, which he calls then the greatest danger, because it kind of blocks us from returning to ourselves. So in that sense, it's some. So that's why I said, like, it depends on who you ask. So it's in a way, some philosophers like Heidegger would say we already passed this point, uh, that we lost control, basically.
Only we are maybe a bit more conscious about, about it now, or we see it like more the changes or the influence of technology. It's like more clear to our eyes in plain view. And maybe
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I follow correctly, but what you say is basically that, or in a sense that all these advancing technologies, and it's gonna be like it's an inevitable part of evolution, and we are just part of it. And whenever, if and when technologies surpass us intellectually or logically or whatever, that's just like part of the evolution. Is that
No, but
maybe something that would derive from what you said?
no, because like so it's not like he doesn't think it's a problem.
No, it's
It's
just a fact.
and it is a fact for somebody like Heidegger, but it's also like a problem. It's something that we actually have to deal with, take very serious. And so it's also like the thing of like losing control here is not so much like there's a Terminator or the Matrix, like, because
Mhm.
that's often how we imagine it. Like there are things like
Yeah.
robots or machines that we lose control over these things, basically. But what I think what's interesting about Heidegger's insight is that actually losing control is a very different thing altogether. Like losing control is being unable to return to yourself, basically. Like so, it's very similar to, for example, when you lose yourself in your everyday existence, then you lose control, which is also not like, if we if we lose ourselves in our everyday existence, there's also no big Terminator doing that. There's no thing doing that.
So, but putting this vessel in more like plain terms. So I think that's quite clear how, for a large proportion of our society, control is completely lost, as in they spend most of the time collected to their devices, not being paying attention at their inner self, their well-being, how they feed themselves, their
Mhm,
personal relationships, and all that. And I think that's for that Heidegger is spot on there, right?
mhm,
But there is a point of, where's the point of no return? As in, all these, if then you go into in some sort of retreat and you remove devices from your life, and you can, to a very large extent, recover personal control. Is there a question out there where there'll be, for society, no way out of the being subdued by technology? Is that a relevant question? Or
that's a great.
would that mean,
Yeah, I mean,
would that be like a good definition of the singularity?
yeah, I don't. So I don't really share fully Heidegger's diagnosis. Maybe the pessimism. I don't fully share the pessimism. Also because I don't share his idea of what the opposite would be. Like, he believes in this idea of Gelassenheit, which is like completely kind of the stoic notion of like being towards death, which I think is a valuable idea, but it's not it's like life is richer and more pluralistic than that.
And
Same with
fun.
technology. I think technology also is a more plural phenomenon than than is being depicted by him. I mean, we are technological beings anyway. We cannot escape that. Like we are, there's no separating the human from technology. They're like one thing. Um, but of course, it is only part. So that's the point. Like, so if that's also what the value of seeing it as a virtue, as instead of seeing it as the collection of things. I think the value is really in seeing it as a disposition rather than collection of things. And if we see it as a disposition, it's one of those dispositions that with which we relate to the world. But it's only one of them, and that's the thing. I think that we can, when we say like we live in a technological society, I think what is meant there is that this disposition is 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 becoming very dominant. It's becoming very prevalent. It's dominating other ways of being, so to say. So, and I think that is pretty true. I think that even though there are still good ways, as you say, like I mean, there's of course the individual escape, which indeed is like not is some kind of remedy, but not really a remedy, because it's indeed like in the end, for all of us, it's about how we live with one another. And and there are also still ways in which I mean I'm not pessimistic in that sense so much that I still think people do engage with or access these different modes of being that are not technological, um, but it becomes increasingly difficult. Yes.
Then there is this thing, open thing, as the weight of technology increases, and there will be more and more devices subject to the control of fewer systems. Like Alexa is already controlling the Internet of Things of millions of houses, and as this progress in a foreseeable way, go Google, and all these, at the end you've got very few systems controlling the the doings of the world. So that's no longer a predisposition, that is subjective control on the side of unpredictable machines, because their algorithms are way outside our means of control or even understanding, right? So do you see, and this is going to be my last question before Pablo moves on to something else. Do
Yeah.
you see this spinning off into a place where technology is no longer a choice, but by an imposition by technology itself?
Yeah, I mean, there's some. So that's, yeah, that's a great question. I think that's one of the dangers that we face now, is indeed this kind of um, increasing synchronization and synthesization of tech, or of the world of technology, which um, uh, precludes kind of diversity. I mean, you still have like these moments when things go differently. I think. I mean, we like, so we just last year we published a book on blockchain technology, for example, and I think crypto is an interesting example, because more than with AI, I think after kind of the Bitcoin white paper in the years, in the kind of early years, um, there was really this wild growth of, you know, of technologies. There was like all these different altcoins. There was all these like people were doing crazy shit. I mean, it was also like a crazy carnivalesque kind of situation in a way, much more than with AI, because AI is kind of controlled by these big corporations. But with crypto, it was a bit like this carnivalesque kind of thing of like, oh yeah, I'm building this my own like coin. I'm doing an ICO and blah blah blah. And of course, it's also crazy, but in a way it also shows that technology doesn't need to be this kind of synthesized thing. There can also be diversity, but this diversity yeah, it is constantly being compromised, because there is a tendency in technology as such, I think, to unify, to it's like this thing that so this anthropologist like Leroy Gohan called this distinction between technological tendency and a technological fact. Like there's different facts that are like, for example, with that, there's, if there's different cultures in the world that like live separately, that invented the same type of technologies that were kind of done differently, but at the same time they converge towards a particular thing, that so that you have same technologies in completely different places. And now with a globalized world, you don't even have this difference. This people are not disconnected anymore, so that even makes the tendency to unify greater. I do think that we need to find ways um, to resist this somehow. Yeah, that diversity, not only diversity in the way that we usually understand it when it comes to people, but also diversity when it comes to technology is actually. And there's actually a philosopher called Yuk Hui, who has this term in his book called techno diversity, which he thinks is like a very important answer to kind of the cybernetic condition, that we need to somehow do something with that. We need, which is also hard, because of course usually we tend to not want that. Like we usually want unification. Like we are always complaining when, like, we have like this plug in our computer and it doesn't fit and stuff. We want like one standard. you know um
Yeah, you don't want to have four means of communicating, but but just one, right? It's like you
mhm.
were speaking to other people, transparent and agnostic to the medium that's carrying that, but you don't want to see all of, and then that will be a huge danger
Mhm.
if we everyone was using the same communication app. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, but that's also why we have to push back.
Anyway, sorry, I'm getting carried away with
No, no,
with
I
other
gotta say one
questions.
thing about it, because I think that's interesting, because that's also why I think we have to push back against this idea of efficiency. I mean, I'm just reading now this book by Alexis de Tocqueville, like the Democracy in America, and I think what's really interesting there is that he talks about kind of this the efficiency of centralization as as a threat to democracy, and he says that actually there is in the United States in the 19th century, this threat is being mitigated actually by means, in a way, of inefficiency. You have all these like local autonomous, look like townships, and they do their own thing. And because they do
Yeah.
their own thing, there's kind of a friction between them doing their own thing and the center wanting to be more efficient. And I think that is maybe a way that we should also look at this kind of question of technology, because of course if we just focus on efficiency, it actually makes sense to have this like centrifugal force that swallows up all differences into some kind of synthesis. But what kind of the Tocqueville kind of shows is that if there are these values, like for example democratic values that we hold dear, then we should push back on that a little bit and say like, well, actually we need friction there as well, just as like a comparison.
Yeah, but also one of the main drivers of technology development, at least the big leaps that are developed by the major corporations who have more access to bigger investments and put more resources into it. Correct me if not. They are driven by the main driver is efficiency in order to be able to be more productive. Um, so that would be, like one obstacle to get that democratization or diversification, if you'd like to.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the history is kind of ambiguous on this point, no? Because corporations are also weird animals. Because sometimes sometimes that's true, sometimes they have an interest in that, but sometimes also not. Like for example, standardization used to be like a huge nightmare. I think that was like like every company was developing their own like media transporting device, and they all wanted their device to be the standard, and there was no like way of getting to anything unification, to any kind of unification. So because eventually corporations just want to make profit, and one way of making profit is actually to resist also a little bit this like synthesization. Because if you have this like unique niche thing that everybody wants to have compared to what the others are doing, then you also don't want to unify everything. So I think that corporations are kind of, the efficiency isn't that one of their things that they want to do, but not always. Sometimes they just want to be inefficient and
Mhm.
and make money.
Correct,
Yeah.
correct. What do you think about I don't know, maybe if we've been talking about, it's been already answered in a way, but how do you see the relationship between between humans and machine evolving?
Well, I mean, it's hard to predict the future. I mean, I don't know. I mean, there are so many different um, ways in which the response is taking shape right now. Like some of the responses are actually like some kind of distanciation. For example, in the Netherlands now there's this new law in schools that they actually forbid kids to have their smartphones with them. So they actually go back in time a little bit. Like so.
Mhm.
If you're a kid in the Netherlands now, you cannot even take your phone to school, because so suddenly you have to talk with people again and stuff. So is there so there's no, it's not so clear to say where things are heading, like because they're heading in different directions at the same time. At the same time, of course, like we also become more intimate with technology. Like you have people who have now like virtual girlfriends and all that stuff. So it goes
And
in many. Yeah.
don't do it if you don't want to, but I'm sure that you have a view, that you have a view of what, I don't know, in 10, 20 years, how things may look like. Like, what do you think maybe the biggest changes in, or the biggest differences between how do we live now and how are we going to be living? How these technology and machines and systems are gonna make a complete picture on the way we live. If if you want to share that view, it's completely imagination, I know, but I'm sure you have
Well, I mean,
really bad view.
I really don't have a very clear view on that, because the only way that we can think about the future in a good way, I think, is in terms of scenarios. Like
Mhm.
I don't think there is one scenario that's completely likely, so that's the one thing that's going to happen. Like
Of course.
because, as I said, like there's these different tendencies. Like people are, so one scenario is, for example, that actually we do have, so one example is one of agonistic kind of development, where you have big tech increasingly becoming political, people increasingly becoming aware of that, increasingly not dissatisfied with that also that they've increasingly become dissatisfied with their dependence on these technologies, especially also with regards to the way they infringe upon our own possibilities and capabilities, and that you get an agonistic situation where people actually push back, where you get a kind of a Luddite kind of response to technology, where people are increasingly um, well, skeptical on the one hand, and also trying to distance themselves, um, also creating different sources of value. I think that's one scenario. But of course, it's not the only scenario. The other scenario is that everybody is so where a different type of ideology wins out, or even that there's like separation of species almost. Like where you have like like people who disconnect, but the other ones that completely connect. Like the fear of missing out, and you have to jump on the bandwagon, and then people are completely committed to actually make their lives completely dependent on artificial intelligence, for example. So yeah, those are all these different possibilities I think exist, and it's really hard to say which one of those is going to actually happen. I don't know.
Of course, of course.
Mm.
Uh, I think we all have different scenarios in mind, depending on a little bit on your mood, on whatever you've read lately, or something like this. What's your view, PJ? PJ?
Well, yeah, my view is not very optimistic because I see the drives that Vessel identifies. They already exist. Our next interviewee, um, Paco Calvo, author of Planta Sapiens, doesn't have a mobile phone. He's never had one, and he's a successful professor of philosophy, and he's got a very full life, but he doesn't have a mobile phone. So you take it from there, and then there are people that there is a resistance. Now, what my view is, I've experienced this in the past, and when you try to fight a system that is already in power, it's very easy for the system to fight you out. Vessel knows what I'm talking about anyway. And what I see is that if you start thinking of social credits systems, for instance, where the state imposes on you the usage of technology and you are coerced by force, by fines or handicaps if you don't use technology, then this resistance to the use of technology will become smaller and smaller. And I'm not very positive. So my best hope is actually that artificial intelligence is a good god. I don't think there's a way out of all of us being subdued by the power of technology. I just hope the technology itself is going to free us from its masters. So I'm not afraid of AI in as a concept. I am currently afraid of the people who are making use of AI, if you know what I mean. And I think they're going to do everything possible, mostly if they are close to government, to actually impose on us the techno-feudalism that is cropping up. Now, rebelling against it is going to be difficult, but I just hope that it's going to be a rebellion from the top. Artificial intelligence itself is going to make sense of things. And this is like my only hope, because I don't see any way out of escaping the tech lords actually.
So you think it's gonna get consciousness? That's not a
Not
possibility.
necessarily behavior. Consciousness is very hard to define, and in according to some definitions of consciousness, it is already conscious. But according to other definition of consciousness, it might never be. So I'm not pretty. That's why my question before was: is the autonomous, independent behavior what we should be worried about, not the actual intrinsic condition of self-consciousness?
Yeah,
Do I care?
I'm I'm personally actually a little bit less skeptical. Even though I do see the point you're making, Pedro. I think because if we think about, I mean, currently the tech sector, like, so if you take all the big ones, maybe except for Apple, because Apple is like a hardware company. So if you take like Google, X, Meta, Amazon is kind of in between because, like, it's still logistic. It's a logistics company, but also like AI and like cloud and all that stuff. Um, I think at least for a large part, like say at least 70% of it or something. If you take this kind of Marxist idea of like your base and superstructure, I think it mostly operates in the superstructure. It doesn't really, it's not like an old fashioned, like it doesn't create steel, doesn't, build machines, like, it's like it doesn't really sit at the what they like the real economy, or like the stuff that most of us use in their daily life in like a substantive way. It sits in the superstructure, and that's also why a lot of the value it creates is also this kind of value that is both very potent but also brittle, or fragile, like, so the value, for example, of this huge advertisement, machine that it has created, or the value of basically all this symbolical capital, like we're switching around, moving around virtual assets all the time. um, and I think that with regards when it comes to the superstructure, I think that there are more possibilities, I think, with reconceptualizing value, in a sense, like, because there's like, for example, the efficiency imperative is much more potent, I think, when it comes to the base and to the superstructure. Like, you can have like a virtual economy where, like this idiocracy kind of idea. You can have a virtual economy that is creating a lot of value, but all the value is stupid. you know like, a lot of value is like, you know it's like people spend money on it, they engage with it all the time and stuff. But then one day we wake up and like, what the hell are we doing? And you wouldn't ask that same question usually about like your daily necessities. Like, you would never ask like, oh, why am I buying food? Like, but we would ask the question of like, what am I doing on Instagram? My God, what is the point of this? So I think, well, I think the very strength of these techno-feudalists is also, in a sense, their weakness, because we are capable of asking these questions, of like changing our perspective on what is valuable in our lives. But I think that's very tightly connected to also how, neoliberal ideology is ingrained in society, and how we think that, we should look at our own self-worth and the worth of people around us, and the worth of the world that we live in. And as long as that ideology is very potent, it's really hard to break free from that question of value, I think.
Okay, I think that was a very interesting take on our relationship with technologies and with technology itself and how it could evolve. Quite interesting. Now jumping to our other big topic, which is immortality. As you know, is something that you see feasible in the near future. What have you read about it? What do you know about it? What do you think about it?
um, well, first of all, I think we have to start with the question of what is immortality. And
Let's say
also, like, because it's actually quite important, I think, because also the way it has been differently understood throughout history. Like, I think Aristotle talks about this. Like, she says like immortality for the ancient Greeks was, for example, the immortality of the deed. It's like to be immortal is not so much to live, like to have your biological life extended, but to be immortal is to be remembered. Like it's by to be remembered by others. Like you're truly immortal if you have deeds that ring through history, basically, rather than to have an extended biological life. And of course, in Christian times, immortality was in a way accessible for everybody because there's an afterlife. Like immortality it's just that so this life is the mortal life, but actually immortality is where we end up after we die, basically. So every soul is immortal, and of course, like the same with many religions. Even though, of course, it's understood differently. Even if you, for example, reincarnate, like the idea of immortality of the soul is something that is very old and is very potent throughout history, and and I think the the idea of immortal biological life has for a long time been kind of an aberration. It's not something that people actually considered, and if they considered it, it was for example, like the medieval alchemists, looking for the stone of or the or the
Philosopher's Stone.
philosopher's stone, the way of the alchemists basically trying to find some potent substance that would make you immortal. And I think and the idea of extending biological life is relatively new, I think, also coming with, of course, the advent of modern science. And when it comes to the feasibility of it, yeah, that's actually, I mean, is that really a very interesting question? In a way, yes, because of course it has big consequences. But I mean, my guess would be, I mean, but the point is, like, we cannot really answer that question very well because I'm not a longevity researcher. But my guess would be that we can definitely go some way in that direction. That I mean, in a way, we've already done that since the start of the 20th century because we get much older than we used to be. So in a way, if we talk about immortality in the sense of longevity, we are already on that trajectory. Like, or we're already, like, I mean, in previous times, Pedro would already be dead, probably.
I mean,
But it's not-
some scientifics say that there's like a ceiling, no, like no matter how much we advance, like we won't be able to live on average more than 120 or 130 or 40, um, as the time and technology advance, because there's some biological ceiling, but there are some others that they are more open to the idea, based on the advance on genetic therapy. But of course, it's all that we know, as of today, is that there are, many. There's an increasing interest in longevity as an industry, and there's an increasing investment in companies, in biotech companies that are, fighting or researching for longevity methods, for life
yeah,
extending methods.
I mean, to me, it doesn't seem unlikely that there will be at some point an innovation that, like we said, like now indeed this is the thing because our bodies destroy themselves. Like it's like aging is not just a coincidence. This is something that's built into our own being. It's like we have to die. Like our bodies make ourselves, like there's no choice. It's like we are built to die. It's true. It's like we live to die. It's there's nothing around. There's nothing contradictory about it. And but of course, like science has probably the capability of finding out the trick that the trick of our own bodies to make ourselves die. And then at some point that it has, I mean, there's the little knowledge I have about it is that you have telomeres at the end of your DNA that gets shorter. And then
Exactly.
if you reverse that, if we can reverse that process, perhaps you can extend life much longer and stuff.
But yeah, it's definitely a topic, because I believe that if I mean, whoever would be rich enough to be able to invest in this in this research, like if you were one of the biggest billionaires in the world, that would be maybe one of your main concerns. Or if you have achieved all your needs in life by large, and then what would be one of your bigger concerns to try to keep that on? Maybe that's when you have the biggest desire not to die, and to be able to continue living and continue and be able to or have the opportunity to experience the things that you haven't been able to experience in life. So so yeah, I think from my point of view, I think there must be a lot of people actually quite interested in that. And yeah, I think as always with technology, there may be many advances that we don't know about yet, or that there won't be public or very accessible to the rest of us as easily.
I think
Yeah,
a good point to take it from here is, okay, there is only time to tell if one day the trick of longevity, of the eternal youth, will be discovered or not. Uh, in principle, I don't think there are fundamental limits to this. It's just a biotechnological problem. But of course, I'm ignorant. Maybe there are. But the question is, let us assume that this magic, the secret of immortality, as we call it, and it's called in Foreverness, the book, the secret of immortality, it is discovered. So there is this magic pill that can be given to individuals. How do you see things evolving from that point? Speculation, of course, Vessel.
no, that's a great question. I think it completely depends on our our ideology of death, because it might be said that it makes, it might be said like it's self-evident that everybody wants to live forever, but I think this is not true. I think this is a great mistake. I think what is self-evident is that as biological creatures we have a survival instinct, and I think this survival instinct is very much confused with the idea that we have a desire to live forever. Like nobody wants to die, of course not. That's why we want to live forever. And then from there, the kind of ideology becomes a little bit confused, I think, because indeed, I think usually the idea is, life is a sequence of experiences. The more you have, the better. But this is like a very shallow idea of what makes life worth living. It's like, like there's it's so easy to like undo that idea. It's like, there's good reasons to believe that a very short life can be very worth living. Even though there was a less long sequence of experiences, and we even know from ourselves, like, like our very being in the moment is not constituted by these experiences, not at all. There's like memories we have that we cherish, but it's not like the more we have the better. It's like that's completely not true. Like the like or like essential to the way that we are as humans is forgetting, for example. Like we actually only have, relatively few deep important memories that we clinch onto, and we don't have this like huge sequence that we cherish, and like that's so important to us. So like the whole ideology of behind this notion of longevity, I think, is completely mistaken. So the way I think, I think the way that people will respond to it really highly depends on their ideology. I think if we all if we all become like enlightened Buddhist monks, nobody would take the pill, probably. Like, make no sense. Like, why would you? Like, it's like completely destroying your own worldview. It's like, what? No, of course I won't take this pill. I mean, I think the only way that people will actually all take this pill is because we are shallow neoliberal subjects. I think that that's the way in which everybody will take this bill.
Ooh, that's a big statement. That's a big statement. I would like to put it in another way. Um, so one of the things that who wants to live to 100? Well, basically everyone who's 99, you know, so most or most people, in the sense that you just want to stay alive. And the one thing is, if you tell a 30, 40, even 50-year-old person, would you choose not to age, not to become old? If you phrase it like that, how many people will choose not to age, not to grow old, and keep enjoying the life they're enjoying with their full health and mental capabilities and everything? And do you think that that may tempt more people?
Well, so there's two things there, you know. Like, so one thing is indeed, if you're 99, you would like to be 100, but that doesn't mean you want to be 200, you know. So I mean, and again, I think that here we no, but I think again here we confuse our biological instinct of survival with desire and a good reason for longevity. That's like those are completely different things, I think. Because of course everybody has this instinct of survival, like, you know, there's just like clear from all our biology that even, you know, that we have this instinct. That's and but I think that that instinct is a really, it's not a it's not a wise instinct. It doesn't give us any wisdom. It just it just hardwired into our brain and body. So that,
Yeah, it's an evolutionary imperative.
exactly, but that doesn't. But it's not an imperative to live forever, because of the imperative, evolutionary imperative, is that we die. It's, you know,
Yeah, as well. Yeah,
it's like completely turning things around in a way. Um, I mean, of course, like when it comes to good health, I think, I mean, I think like the weird thing about modernity, I think, is that the idea of not having good health for the first time actually became a thing. Like before modernity, nobody existed
yeah.
in this state of no good health because you die.
Yeah,
Like, you
yeah.
know, like as soon as you get a state of no good health, you die. It's like, you know, but only since modernity, because we have modern medicine, there is this state of not having good health. And of course, nobody wants that. That actually makes a lot of sense. So I think that I can understand pretty well. I think, you know, I mean, if we can make people not suffer the suffering they have under the conditions of modern medicine, I think that makes a lot of sense. To me, that has nothing. To me, that has little to do with immortality in a sense, because I mean, of course, like there's also like the aging process, which contributes a little bit, um, even though less than we think, I guess, because, you know, if you age healthily, you can actually be pretty fine even when you're 90, or, you know, like, no, of course,
That's coming from a young man. That's coming from a young man.
no. I mean, I'm saying pretty fine. I'm not saying, of course, you're not the same shape, but then is that, so behind that is of course the question of like, is there also a worth in having stages of life, for example, and does it also make sense actually to have a different physique in different stages of life? You know, we also don't question, you know, for example, childhood and adolescence. You know, like we don't say like, oh, why don't we just, why are we not born as fully grown 25-year-olds? Like we don't ask that. We see we do see some value in being a baby and being a toddler and being, you know, so for some reason we do see value in that, but then we don't see value in what comes after. It's strange, you know, because like we also have fewer capabilities before, you know.
So regarding that, it would maybe there would be a lot of value for for lots of people to be grandparents, to be able to experience being grandparents. So maybe that would be a reason why they would like to 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 um, to take the pill, no? so to speak.
To be
So
great
and
grandparents.
yeah, to be great grandparents, yeah. And
Yeah.
and I don't know if I would consider that a shallow reason, you know.
Well, I think in our world, it's more likely that people are not even parents. So I don't know
You
now.
know, the reason
Two
for
people.
me, the best reason to take the pill would be to be able to plant a bush and see trees growing hundreds of years old around it. You know, the creating a garden that grows old and old with olive trees 2000 years old twisting around. I think that would be for me the biggest motivation for immortality.
Okay.
You have a
Well,
lot of patience.
that's that's a nice idea, I suppose. I mean, yeah, why not? It doesn't sound like a compelling reason, but it does sound like a nice reason. Yeah,
A romantic reason, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. Well,
Just like
compelling is individual, isn't it?
yeah,
It's
yeah,
compelling for some people, not compelling for other people.
yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's also alternative universes in which you would get the same bliss or beauty in a very short life with different types of experiences.
Oh yeah, but
So
you are who you are. Anyway, but yeah, that's going off a tangent.
We have one last question. I think I know the answer already. Uh, but knowing that you could always choose to age and die if you wish to do so, would you would you choose to be immortal given the chance?
yeah, but this is a bit of a trick question, I think.
Hmm.
Because the problem with the because this is also like an ethical question, no? Like so it's or kind of a question about ethics and morality. And which is also very produced by modernity. I think we increasingly have cases where choices are, justifiable at the individual level, but not justifiable at the level of the collective. I mean, depending on your perspective, um, like what I always find an interesting case is this. I think in Australia, at some point they decided to do like prenatal screening for the Down syndrome, and make that like a standard thing. And then it soon became clear that Down syndrome was disappearing. Like there were increasingly less people with Down syndrome. And even though collectively we would say like, well, actually we do value, people with Down syndrome actually existing. The cumulative effect of individual choices under such conditions are that actually this ceases to exist. Like it just doesn't exist anymore. Yeah.
Mhm.
And I think that, I mean, it's like just an example of a case where there's this ambiguity between like, of course, individually, like an individual decision, like if you are confronted with the knowledge, like, okay, your unborn child has Down syndrome, do you want to abort or not? Like then actually it makes the individual decision then make it can be is justified, but then still the collective um effect at least can be argued to be morally problematic. And I think that even worse with immortality, the pill or whatever, like like the collective havoc it will wreak will be immense. It will create all kinds of issues. Like it's worse than the Chinese one-child policy. Um, but individually, like these choices can be justified. Yes, so that's so that's the that's why it's a nasty question. 'Cause as an individual, I might actually say yes. I mean, if it's being offered to me, like, but if you ask me about the collective effect, I say no. Absolutely not.
You know, the fundamental premise of the two first volumes of Foreverness is precisely the havoc that
Hmm.
gets wreaked after the secret of immortality is unveiled.
Hmm.
So yeah, I don't think you can look at that scenario without thinking of havoc, do you?
It seems like no. I think it is like it seems like a recipe for disaster,
I
pretty
was
much.
thinking of those words exactly. Immortality is a recipe for disaster, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, maybe not immortality, but like extreme longevity, longevity, like longevity,
Either
longevity,
or.
like extreme.
Longevity, yeah.
If we would, even if we would turn to be like 500 years or 1,000 or whatever, like that's we're not immortal, but like extreme longevity. Like yeah, that's
Longevity.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's the recipe for disaster. Yeah.
Maybe we are experiencing that already, you know? Is the world
Uh,
more of a disaster than it was when we were able to live only until we were 30?
Yeah, of course, because we have this whole like in Dutch it's called vergrijzing. It's like I'm not sure what is a nice English word for it, but like the old people getting more and more, and we don't know what to do with them. And like it's actually a big problem indeed. Like it's yeah.
Yeah, I th-
Okay.
yeah, I think that's that's it, no? That I think we have covered the main topics, the main questions we wanted to ask you.
Mhm.
So I think that's a wrap up, and thank you very much for your time and for your insights. It's been a very interesting conversation that I'm sure we will enjoy very much.
Well, thank you for having me.
Indeed, what I have always enjoyed from Vessel is precisely that you ask him one question, the where he never answers the way you expect. So he always takes you to a side road to give you his answer. So thank you very much for that
Thank you
that
for
The
train
side
of
roads,
thought.
the side roads. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
thank you for not
Yeah,
falling
thank you
into
for the side
tricks.
roads.
For not
yeah.
falling into
Yeah,
tricks. Yeah, correct, correct, correct.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. You've been listening to Foreverness, and thank you. Bye bye.